So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for signing up for our webinar this morning around how and why we became a B Corp. So, the approach that we're going to take this morning, it'll be slightly informal. It's going to be in the form of a fireside chat, and it'll just give everyone a feel of the process that we've been through and also an opportunity to ask some questions in terms of in relation to some of your thinking and also our experience as well. So what I would ask is that if you do have any questions or any thoughts at the moment, if you post your company name, where you are in this particular journey at the moment, is it something you're just considering? Are you looking a bit further down the line in terms of that consideration process? And really, is there any burning questions that you'd like to know? So I'm going to just give a wee bit of a scene setting before passing over to sort of the main event in terms of Caroline and explaining our process and what we went through. So what does a B Corp actually mean? So B Corp is the only global accreditation that deals with 5 key areas of business. So you're looking at governance, workers, community, customers, and environment all in one go. So balancing purpose and profit are really the key way that B Corp does business, and it's really around a community of leaders using business as a force for good. So the B Corp movement encourages companies to take an ethical approach in terms of how they're doing business, and it really is about adhering to the highest standards around governance, sustainability, and transparency. So one of the uniqueness around B Corp is that in most accreditations, the certification approval process is usually the end point. However, B Corp is about an end certificate or result. It's about actually going through an ongoing journey to achieve the long-term good across all aspects of your business. So without further ado, and to kick things off, I've got a few questions to fire across to Caroline. And really, some of the burning ones that we've been getting asked, and one of the reasons why we've held this webinar is really around why did we join and go through the certification process? How did we find the process to becoming certified? What have we learned along the way? And then, do we have any top tips in terms of what we've experienced and what we can share with other organisations? So, Caroline, over to you.
Faces to me and some new ones. I think we had something like 37 people registered for this, which is brilliant. Many weren't able to make today, but want to get the recording. So that tells me that this is a really interesting topic, which is fantastic. So I suppose I need to have I should have spoken to the legal team about some kind of disclaimer here, but we're just coming at this from our angle in terms of what we've done. We're not sort of B Corp professionals from the B Corp team, but really it's just from our angle about why we've done this and the reason why we did it. And we're fairly early in our journey, so we're just under 2 years into being a startup. Was that I spoke to many people. So there's like B Corp's been going since 2007, and I've been looking at it for years and years and years. There's about 3,000 certified members worldwide, and there's 600 and growing in the UK. And actually, that number has doubled since the pandemic. So it's that sort of the time is now, the time feels right for people to do it. And there's other big companies that you'll recognise, like Innocent and Unilever, Ben and Jerry's. They're all sort of in that B Corp space. And for me, when I spoke to some colleagues about it, they said, don't wait until you're 10 years in or 5 years into your business to go through the B Corp journey, because you'll need to go back and retrospectively change everything that you did at the start. So that was the reason we did it. It's not to say that it's impossible. Of course, anything's possible. It's just that the earlier on in your journey you do it, in my view, then that's just the way that we operate. So there's 5 key areas that you have to go through the impact assessment around. That's governance, your workers, your people, community, environment, and customers. And it's a very, very rigorous process. It took us 1 year and 5 months, I think it was, to actually get through that process. And we became a B Corp pending after 12 months of trading, which means that we were going through the assessment, but we weren't quite there yet, and we needed to do a lot of things. But one of the main reasons why I did this was I see it as a commitment from our people, from our business to the environment and society. And some of you will know that, you know, the ESG agenda is really, really strong now, and it's a key element of bigger companies in particular statements. But it's also an opportunity for us to align our work and how we operate. So if you think about those 5 areas, I wanted us to start really early on saying, well, you know, are we doing the right things for our people? Are we transparent with our financial position? Are we able to, you know, provide environmental support or ideas, quick wins for our staff and our people as we grow as an organisation? Firstly, it's the right thing to do is the first reason why I wanted to do this. It does have a positive impact on your brand. And in fact, one of the stats is that year-on-year growth of a certified B Corp is 28 times higher than other organisations in those sectors. I picked that up from one of the research pieces that B Corp have put out, and happy to share it, any of that. But they talk about the fact that it drives performance, you know, recruitment. We know that the younger generation want to work for socially responsible, purpose-led businesses. And this is another way to show that you or we are that. It helps scalability as well, for investors looking to bring diversity to their portfolios or invest, then you know, it's a great way to do it. So that, Chris, is just really a kind of my thoughts on why we wanted to do it. I think one of the biggest learnings, so in terms of transparency, we just passed. I'd love to say to you that out of a score of 200, we got 198. We didn't. We got 85, and the pass mark's 80. And there was some gaps in, you know, much lower scores around environment. So they ask you some detailed questions about environment, like, do you understand what your water usage is? No, we don't. So we scored 0 for that. You know, do you understand how your staff, you know, what the energy levels that you burn in as a day-to-day operation? We just don't know that. So whilst we passed, we're really excited about that. What we're also excited about is this is just the start of the journey, and we can continue to get better and better each time. And B Corp are really good at giving you some support around that. So this was a complete team effort. We gave each of our teams a different area and a different section to consider and work on. And it's not just about the impact assessment. You know, it's not that kind of checklist approach. Oh, great, we'll tick to box. You actually need to answer all the questions if you can. And if you can't answer them, you don't. But the ones that you can, you have to provide that evidence. So it's a really robust process, which I like, because it's not just a gimmick or greenwashing or a marketing tactic. It's actually truly about making sure that we are, across all those 5 areas, a business that does good. So that's my kind of overview, Chris. I don't know if you've got any questions that you feel are appropriate to ask.
Yeah, so you touched on the it took us a year and a few months to do that. How did we find the process becoming certified? You mentioned again there that it was certain members of the team that took it forward. Is that something that you'd recommend for other businesses to do?
Yeah, definitely. Take a team approach. There's no way one person can hold it and own it. But if you think about those 5 areas, they actually cut across different areas of your business usually. Or if you're smaller, it will be 1 or 2 key people, which is what we had. But it's much better to do that, because it's about accountability, you know, that sense of responsibility, that transparency. And I suppose it just means they're part of the foundation of the business, really. But also there's excitement in our team to see our scores improve. You know, so it's yeah, the team effort for sure, definitely.
And from your perspective, and obviously overseeing the organisation, was it quite an intensive process in terms of staff resource? I'm sure that's something that other organisations would like to sort of know. How much time and resource and effort do you think that did we have to put into it to actually get that accreditation piece?
I'm going to pass to Tia on this one, I think, because I would probably give you a figure that's in my mind about how long something takes, and it's probably not the reality. So, Tia, what's your thoughts on the whole process?
I think it differs so much for section to section, and it depends on how available your evidence is. So, like we said at the start, if you're way down the line in your journey and you have to go back and find all the evidence, it might take a little bit longer. And because we were quite a small team, I think it took quite a bit of resource to gather that evidence. But it means that if they have questions, if B Corp comes back to you and says, like, oh, can you expand on this a bit more? We need a bit more additional evidence. Some things can just take a little bit longer. But that means when you come to recertification 3 years down the line, if you're structured about it from the start and you make an effort to be really organized about where you gathered your evidence and making sure you're building it into your processes, it should mean that recertification down the line is much easier. So it takes quite a bit of resource, I think, but it's all worth it if you do it smartly, I think.
Thanks, Tia. And in terms of what we've learned along the way, Caroline, as an organisation and within the teams that have actually been doing it, is there any sort of key points that stand out? Did you, one of the questions is, did you think we were at the point that we've been accredited to, or did you think we were further ahead, or would we have been a wee bit lower? Because I think one of the responses was it was 85, and originally we thought it might be 85 out of 100, but it was 85 out of like 200. So do you think it's an accurate measure, and did it help refocus in terms of how we move forward?
Yeah, I really do. I think for where we are in our journey, it was a really fair assessment of where we are, and particularly around the environment question. So we've got an environmental policy that like you dispose of your tech in a in a proper way. But we really struggled to meet any of those other questions around the environment, because we really hadn't considered it enough. We were quite early in our journey. Other people might be a little bit further on in their thinking around that. And we all work from home, so we're all remote working. We've got an office that we collaborate in, but our bases are all over Scotland and beyond, really. But questions like monitoring water usage or greenhouse gas emissions were really, really hard for us. And I don't think that we're still clear on how we're going to be able to collect that information or articulate it yet. But I suppose that's the next part of the journey, really, is what's our goals? If we want to get better in the environmental section, what are the goals that we want to set that will allow us to achieve that? But on the other hand, we scored really high on the workers. They call it workers, like, our staff, our people section, because we're a living wage employer. We offer flexible working, and we provide lots of sort of training opportunities. So things like that we scored really, really high on. So it's good. You see where the gaps are, for sure.
And in terms of the benefits, you touched on a few previously, around brand and around sort of culture. Is there anything from your perspective, and obviously purpose and profit align very closely with what we do, how B Corp can sort of help drive cultural change across businesses? Is that something you think is a real strong sort of cornerstone of what this is all about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the B Corp community, there's something called, I think it's called the Beehive, and it's where everyone comes together. And Tia's been in a few, I've been in a couple, Tia's been in a few of those calls. It's like one of the best calls you do. They're just a ball of energy. They're just a ball of like-minded people who want to do the best across all these different areas, and they want to create that great culture. And I actually think for an organization that's been going for many, many, many years, that wants to try and have a better, more positive working environment or working culture, that this is one of the best ways to do it, to get teams engaged and behind it and really understanding it, because it isn't a tick box exercise, and because it is about proof and it is about evidence, it's a really, and then goals, and then how you get better. It's a really great way to connect people into something that's important. However, it's not about scoring points, right? So, you know, I know we talked in our team meeting about 85 out of 100. We're amazing. No, it's 200. All right, okay. You know, but actually, it's nothing to do with the point scoring. It's you know, employee volunteering is really important to us. You don't score any points for that. We encourage businesses to get engaged in working in the community and doing something for others, expecting nothing in return, and the feeling you get from that. But that's not, you don't score any points for that. So I would just say, you know, whilst it's a brilliant network, it's a brilliant process, the whole community are really supportive. It doesn't mean that you move away from some of the great other things that you do in your business, but definitely for cultural alignment, I think it's a great thing.
And like you'd say, we're not sort of, this is our experience, but in comparison to sort of other accreditation programs, how have you found this experience, and what do you see as being one of the main reasons for going for this over maybe other types of accreditations?
Just the breadth of it, Chris. So I can see that a couple of people from Remarkable are on here. I can see Bonnie's smiling face there. Bonnie's the CEO at Remarkable, and you know, the Investors in People program is something that I'm hugely passionate about, and lots of our business members are too. But it was just the breadth of it. So, you know, and I know that the Investors in People program is really rigorous too. But the people part of it within B Corp, it was really just, and that's great. But you know, if you wanted to go deeper into that, then you would absolutely look at something like Bonnie's team offer and that support that they provide. But actually, it was just the breadth. And that's where I felt, and it wasn't, and it's not the tick box. I keep talking about this, but it is about actually doing and setting goals. And the team at B Corp give you ideas, and they you know, they did come back and say that evidence is not good enough. It's not going to work. You know, you absolutely need to provide further evidence. So easier things to do, like you need to change your articles of association, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it's really changing those articles to make sure that you're adhering to the B Corp standards. So, you know, as a smaller organisation, that was easier for us to do, but some of the bigger organisations that are on the call today, that'll be that could take a long time. That could take you 6 to 12 months to get that process in place. And that is have we changed our articles? Yes, we've been through legal. It's now on Companies House, done. But some of the other things around, well, how do you manage your flexible working? And you know, if someone wants to leave at lunch, how do they know they're able to do that? How do they know that you offer flexible working? Are your policies clear enough, and are they not just in a handbook in a drawer? How do you make sure those are alive? So those are the sort of deep dive questions that you get asked, really.
We've got some really good questions that are coming through on the chat. So in terms of, I'll just carry over to that, and then we can revisit some of the other ones we've got. So in terms of, we touched a wee bit on the benefits. One of the questions from Sarah is, can we quantify the benefits for our brand recruitment and talent retention from your perspective, Caroline?
I suppose what we mean by quantify, really. I mean, it's you know, if you've got a graduate recruitment program and you're not getting any graduates coming to you, and you start changing things to make you more appealing to graduates or younger people, and or people in general coming into your business, then it's almost like, is it that thing that's done it, or is it this thing that's done it? You know, what is the key change that's been made to align that? And I suppose an example of that is that we spoke to a accountancy firm a few years ago, brilliant accountancy firm, and they did a graduate recruitment fair, and they just couldn't understand why none of the students were coming to speak to them. And there was lots of different organisations, and they were all really busy and buzzy. And they said, you know, I don't understand, why is no one coming to speak to us? You know, they were going out to grab them. The students were like, no. Anyway, at the end of the day, it turns out that the giveaways that were on their table were plastic earpods, plastic water bottles, plastic straws, and the students just made a stand and put it on on their chat room and said, don't go to that stand because they don't care about the environment. And actually that wasn't true, but that's the trend, and things that are that's actually what's out there. That's what people are seeing and saying. That's what younger people are looking at. Are you a socially responsible employer, and what does that encompass, and what does that mean? So in terms of quantify, they then changed and made everyone aware that they just hadn't thought it through enough and didn't think about the market, didn't look at the trends and what was happening and how people were feeling about who they wanted to work for, and they've wonderfully addressed that now. But yeah, so things like that, I think you can quantify it, and the evidence around performance, around B Corps and performance, is based on surveys, customer surveys that have been done around why did you buy from us over another company? And a lot of the responses are because we saw you do this in the community, because we saw you care about the environment in this way, and there's evidence there of that. And staff surveys around why did you come to us? What attracted you to our organisation? And those are the sorts of responses that people are saying. Well, we could see that you care about your people in your community, the culture, the environment, all that great stuff.
Thanks, Caroline. And one from Bonnie is just around, obviously we're in a very unusual set of circumstances at the moment, and hopefully we're heading into a much more positive place in terms of being in an office again and things like that. But with the hybrid working and B Corp, did they help with any ideas in terms of home working, and did we find that a challenge as well in terms of quantifying some of the data, because it's a slightly different model rather than being in a head office, so to speak? And Tia, this might be one that you can maybe help with as well.
Yeah, definitely. So Bonnie, to your question specifically, did the team at B Corp help with ideas? I don't know if it was necessarily the team at B Corp, but definitely the questions that they asked helped urge some thoughts with us. Like there was some policy that they suggested, I can't fully remember, but I know that we saw that question and went, we could pull that together really quickly. Let's just do that. And then we've got that policy in place. So it was a really quick win. So I don't think it was necessarily the team at B Corp that helped with it, but just the questions themselves made us think like, oh, we could be doing this a little bit better. And definitely, I don't know if we would have started thinking about water consumption or energy consumption with working from home if those questions hadn't popped up. But I will say the team at B Corp are really helpful, especially Caroline was saying how there was one point where we didn't have the right evidence for one section, and they said either you would need to develop this evidence a lot more, or actually that evidence could apply to this question over here, and you could get the points by using that same evidence. So they're here to help you and work, like they want you to certify as well. They want to expand this movement of businesses creating social good. So don't be too worried about putting evidence in the wrong place or whatever, because you'll have a team member that's able to help you out and say, like, you could actually put it over there and get some points.
Thanks, Tia. And just sticking with yourself, one of the questions from Alistair is just in terms of some of the requirements within maybe the supply chain. Was that something that we were asked about? And how did we quantify that as well? Or has that made us consider how the supply chain works as well?
It's actually just having a look through some of the questions. And I don't know how explicitly they asked, because that's not as relevant to us. I don't think we delved into that very much, but I'm sure that if you had evidence of things going well further down the supply chain, you'd be able to put that in and count that towards your evidence for some points. But I don't know, I don't think they explicitly ask very much about like really far down the supply chain.
Yeah, for this level of assessment, they didn't go deep into your suppliers, but what they do ask around is what's your principles and how do you deal with your suppliers. So we were able to evidence that we are really proactive, and were proactive, particularly during the pandemic, about our sort of working principles and our stakeholder orientation around suppliers, which is about dealing fairly and ethically. So, you know, if there was payment challenges, that you evidenced conversations that you had early on to say, you know, due to the current situation, we're going to be late on that payment, as an example, and this is, we're going to keep in touch with you every 2 weeks because this is going to affect you, and things like that. So it was that fairness. So we've got a supplier fairness policy process, and that's about, you know, making sure that suppliers are treated like our customers, like our partners, and have a really positive experience when dealing with Social Good Connect. So, but other than that, Alistair, I don't think there was any detail, but we could double check that to you, because there was some specific supply questions, but it wasn't about who your suppliers are and evidence that you've done due diligence on those suppliers, although we do have due diligence, is that how you say it, policies for the charities that work with us and our suppliers, so we were able to evidence some of that.
And it's great to see some of the conversation in the chat as well, because I see Scott, who's joined us as well, who had sort of outlined that there is an element around the supply chain being screened for their positive impact, and that gives maybe some more points based on that certain criteria. So yeah, that's something that certainly we can either direct onto whoever we've worked with around B Corp as well. And
yeah,
then
Scott, Scott's a lawyer, actually, everyone. So what Scott says is true. Scott works for a company called Medici Legal, and we had a catch up yesterday, so he'll definitely have more info on that for sure.
And then Jules has asked a really good question in terms of they've recently submitted their B Corp application and now waiting to be signed assessor. How did you go about the legal requirement process of the application, and what were our first steps to tackling this? And is there any advice for this part of the application?
Yeah, hi Jules. Scott might want to come in actually if he's happy to, because this is something we were chatting about yesterday in terms of what the next steps are. Scott, are you okay just to give a little overview?
Yeah, if you like. I don't know where you are in your process and what you've actually done, but there's your core constitutional documents in the firm that you're with. You've got to look at that and make sure it reflects the B Corp or the B Corp requirements. And then, as Caroline's been saying, that then flows through all the other policies that you've got within the organisation and such like. So there's an awful lot of the heavy lifting that you can do yourself, and that's clearly cheaper in terms of expense. But there are a whole variety of lawyers who could do that for you. I think there's 3 firms that are actually B Corp certified in the UK just now. They're all quite high-end lawyers, and you can take from that what you want. But yeah, it's something that's relatively straightforward to do, as long as you all have a keen interest to do this, and you don't have to convince investors to go through their shareholder agreements and change articles and such like, because as Caroline says, that can be tedious and long. So you'd want to ensure that anything that you have to do with your articles is in tune with your investor communications and your investor cycle for engagement.
Yeah, and just to add to that, thanks Scott, just to add to that, we B Corp do give you the wording that you can use, so they actually give you a template wording that you will then need to take to board and stakeholders, as Scott's described, investors and so on, to get them to agree to that. And then it's just about the legal team, you know, changing the articles, she says, making it sound like it's a really quick job, but changing the articles and you know, and lodging that for you. So but great, Jules, that you've submitted it and you're going through the process.
And that maybe touches on a conversation we had previously as well, Caroline, in terms of the point in a journey for an organisation. So would you recommend doing it as early in the setup phase, or obviously depending on the size of the organisation, sometimes you have to unpick certain articles of association, things like that. And I think you spoke about maybe a couple of other experiences that people have had in terms of actually catching it quite early is quite a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean that's just what I wanted to do. You know, and I've spoken to some colleagues who are going through it at the moment, and it is a much bigger job to unpick and then really change mindsets around all these different areas around, you know, the governance side and your environmental stuff and your customer policies. You would think and hope that those that want to be B Corp certified are probably likely to have 2 or 3 of those areas that they're much better on than others, around, you know, their people and possibly community, hopefully customers. And it's just working out how to get better at it, really. But you know, you are where you are in your business journey. You want to do it now, just go for it, is what I would say. I don't know if we fully answered the question about time, and I think maybe one of the reasons is because we didn't actually track it all. It was just, you know, it was a case of, right, let's work on this part this month, and it was just an evolving piece. You know, it was almost like the completer finisher in me never kind of got there, because, you know, that first section, you were like, God, have we done everything? Have we got, what else can we evidence here? And that's the one thing they don't do, is they don't give you templated, apart from the articles, they don't give you anything templated, and there's a really good reason for that. And it's, if they did, everyone would just pick it up and just add their logo and change their name. This is about what you do, and it's about them assessing you in those particular areas, about where you are in your journey, the number of employees you have. The more employees you have, the harder it is. The more you are, you know, all in the office together, for example. And I think B Corp are starting to change that back to, I think it was Bonnie's question about the hybrid working. Like, what do we need to consider here in terms of our assessment? So yeah.
Fantastic. And in terms of some of our other questions as well, Caroline, so what would you term as success looking like for the B Corp accreditation? We've spoke a lot about growth, and this is really the start of the journey. So what would you think is next for us in terms of that process?
Tia and I were just chatting about this. So we are, we have this as an agenda item for our board, for our advisory board meetings now. We have this as part of our monthly face-to-face all-team meet. And I think it's a kind of spreadsheet here that B Corp give you around all the areas, what you evidenced, how you scored, and then we set our goals around what we want to improve. The recertification process is in 3 years' time, but you really want to be looking at what you can do year on year to get better or adapt or change in each of those areas. So that's really how we're planning to bring it to life with the team and keep it as something that we chat about regularly. I don't know if there's anything else, Tia, that...
Yeah, all I'd say is that I think the way we'll judge success is just seeing how much we improve in 3 years' time. I think you can only judge success against where you were as an organization and where you got to after certifying, because I know we joked about like just barely passing, that the mark is 80 out of 200, but as some reference points for that, B Corp says that a non-B Corp business on average would get around 40 marks, and they have like top performers every year, and they only hit around 150, 160, and these are massive corporations that have all the resources in the world, and they still don't hit 200. So I think success, like if you certify, that's like a great success in and of itself. It's a really rigorous process. So if you're able to get those 80 points, you've done incredibly well. And then from there, judging success, it's just what you can do in the 3 years until you recertify and getting more points from there. I'd also say that, you know, it is obviously incredibly rigorous, and they've assigned points to a certain value. Obviously, they've gone through an intensive process to determine how many points you can get for each different area you provide evidence for. But there's definitely going to be things in your organization, if you're a socially conscious business, that you are doing, but there's nowhere to put it into the B Corp certification process, like employee supported volunteering. So the points are obviously important for certifying, but don't get too wrapped up in it. Just let it be a journey to be more socially conscious that happens to include B Corp certification.
I like that.
Thanks, Tia. So, Caroline, what would your top tips be?
So I think I've maybe covered. So in summary, I think I would have a whole team approach. get them excited about where you are in the journey, and setting those goals to improve. You know, it's part of the foundation of our business. It's who we are, rather than something else we need to do. I would think about that as an approach. Play the long game. It's a long game. It's you know, there's so much to do. It was probably the last thing a startup should be thinking about, I'll be really honest, when they're in that startup phase. But it's been a brilliant experience and learning, and so make it happen. Small wins. If it takes longer than expected, which it certainly did for us, then great. That's the principles, I suppose, of doing business in general, isn't it? Celebrate, enjoy the challenges. So every time we were able to evidence and get through a particular section, we'd do a big rah-rah on Slack or in our team session to say, right, brilliant, well done. And it was each individual person who was kind of accountable for that section as well. So that was really great. Clarity on thinking. So if you haven't done anything in this space, or you're just starting out on your journey to how do we be more socially responsible, how do we attract the right people to our organisation, how do we better serve our customers, what should we be considering with the environment, it's a great tool to give you clarity on that thinking. So learn as much as you can, not just from the B Corp website itself, but actually from others who've been through it, really, because that's what we did. Not a tick box exercise, evidence key, and you know, and as Tia nailed already, but just think about all the other great things that you do, even though you don't get points for it in B Corp. Just keep that in mind when, you know, bringing it all together as a communication, really, and to your stakeholders. And I think the other thing is we have had an overwhelmingly positive response to this. Much more so than I ever imagined. I think we put out a couple of posts about, yay, you know, we've managed to get through certification, and customers, prospects, you know, others have just come and said, we just love this, tell us more, want to know more about it, we've looked at it, not sure it's for us. So a really positive response. It's just a tool to ensure that we follow best practice and we can set goals and improve on where we are now.
And I think one of the final questions just in the chat, just before we sort of open it up, just to see if there's any more. Tia, this is maybe one you can help answer. It was from Ying Ying. It is around, so as a self-employed person, can they be certified as a B Corp? Is there any sort of criteria in terms of the size of an organisation, or is it more about commitment in terms of wanting to actually do it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no minimum size to certify, so it seems like you're all good. And it seems like there's, you know, when we started this process, we were really quite small. So there's no minimum size. And once you actually get into the community, there's really active members from everywhere down to, you know, like a couple of people to massive corporations.
Yeah, I think it's it just says sole trader. So that's the kind of base level.
So I think we've covered all the questions in the chat. I'd just like to, based on everything that you've all heard, is there any more at this point? And then I can maybe ask a couple more just before we round up. Great, thank you very much for all your engagement today. So Caroline, in terms of looking back, is this something that, having been through the process, you would do again in a heartbeat? And would you ultimately recommend it to other organisations?
A heartbeat's probably too strong, Chris. I would definitely recommend it. I think the community, as I've said, is brilliant. They're great people, and if you want to get your business and your team on board with being more socially responsible, then highly recommend from that perspective. It's not for the faint-hearted, I would say, because it does require a lot of effort, and you might find as you go through it that actually you've got a lot of evidence. So, you know, you're okay, you're good to go. But there'll be other areas where you think, gosh, we haven't even considered that, or we really don't do much in that space. And that's the tough part, because you need to actually put it in place. I think Tia referred to a policy that we didn't have. It was an environmental policy. We just didn't have that in place. So we had to go and research that and you know, work out, well, how does that apply to us, and what should our environmental policy look like based on how we work and you know, flexibly and so on. So so you have to then research, find it, adapt it, change it, make sure that's going to fit, make sure people can understand that that's something that would easily fit into their day-to-day lives before you can evidence it. So, you know, it's not just a case of get a policy, tick, away you go. Yeah, absolutely, I'd recommend it for sure.
So just to probably round up, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully this morning's left everyone a bit inspired in terms of what B Corp offers. It's a wee bit warts and all in terms of the discussion that we've had and our experience. And certainly from what we've found, B Corp are very accommodating, very engaged, and always sort of keen to help. So I think, yeah, overall we found it a very positive experience in terms of self-reflection and also growth for us as an organisation. And I think this is really just the start of the journey in terms of where we're heading and what that means for us. So yeah, I just want to thank you all. What we're going to do is we've recorded the call, so we can then look to share some of this with you all, just to sort of reference and sort of take it from there. And I'd just like to thank everyone for their interactive nature today and engagement, and wish you all a lovely weekend.
Great, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.